All right, Cowboys Nation, buckle up because we've got a packed show today with a lot to break down. Let's start with the latest buzz that's got everyone talking: the situation surrounding Savone Rebel and his knee injury setback. This is the kind of news that immediately gets fans worried, but before anyone starts hitting the panic button, let's really dive into the full context and understand what's actually going on. So here's the deal. Albert Breer, a pretty reliable voice when it comes to NFL news, recently dropped this little nugget. During a podcast appearance with Connor Orr, they were having a broader conversation about the Cowboys draft class, and right in the middle of it, Breer casually mentioned that Rebel had experienced what he described as a little bit of a setback with his knee. Now, anytime you hear the word setback in the same sentence as a young quarterback rehabbing a torn ACL, it's understandable that people start to get nervous. But let's not get carried away just yet. First off, the way Breer framed it made it clear that this isn't some catastrophic career-altering issue. This wasn't a new injury or some major retire. It sounds like more of a speed bump in the recovery process, something that unfortunately is pretty common for athletes coming off a major knee surgery like this. According to Breer, the expectation is still that Rebel will be okay in the long run. That's obviously encouraging, but the timing of this news is what's raising eyebrows, especially with training camp creeping up fast. And here's something else to keep in mind from everything I've heard and from what's being reported by multiple sources close to the team. This setback isn't some brand new development that just popped up this week. This is something that was known before the draft. In fact, there's a growing belief that Rebel's pre-draft medical evaluations were a big reason why he slipped all the way to the third round. There were legitimate expectations from scouts and front offices that he could have been a second-round pick, but questions about his health made teams a little hesitant. It's worth noting that Rebel wasn't the only player in this Cowboys rookie class with lingering injury concerns that weren't widely known at the time. Trey Amos, for example, also had some stuff going on that didn't really make headlines until after the fact. That's just part of the gamble teams take when evaluating prospects. Sometimes the medicals reveal things late in the process that shift draft boards. Now, when we look at the typical timeline for ACL recoveries, Rebel is still within a reasonable window. Remember, he tore the ligament back in September. Most athletes, even with top-tier rehab and medical support, take around 9 to 12 months to get back to full football activities. For Rebel, that puts him right on the edge as we approach training camp. It's not unusual for players at this stage to still be working their way through the final phases of rehab, still getting cleared for full speed cuts and changes of direction. To put it bluntly, this was always going to be a situation where the Cowboys would have to be cautious. Drafting a player coming off a serious injury always carries risk. We've seen it before. Some players bounce back stronger than ever, while others unfortunately never quite return to their pre-injury form. Look no further than Michael Gallup. Since his ACL injury, he's struggled to look like the same explosive receiver he was before. On the flip side, someone like Nick Chubb tore up his knee and came back like nothing ever happened. Every player's recovery is different, and there are no guarantees. The good news, if we're looking for silver linings, is that there haven't been any new complications reported since that pre-draft setback. From everything I've been told, Rebel has been on track since then. The team hasn't had to adjust his rehab plan drastically, and they're still optimistic he'll be able to participate at some level during camp. But whether he's fully cleared for the start of camp, that's the big question, and that leads us to the debate that's going to dominate Cowboys Nation over the next few weeks. Will Savone Rebel be ready for the opening day of training camp? It's one of those questions where if you poll the fan base right now, I bet you'd get something close to a 50-50 split. Maybe 60-40, with the optimists outweighing the pessimists, especially since it's June, and this is the time of year where hope runs high. Personally, I think there's a very real chance the Cowboys take the conservative route with him. They've got too much invested in Rebel's long-term future to risk rushing him back for the sake of a few extra training camp reps. It's not about week 1 of training camp, it's about making sure this kid is ready for week 1 of the regular season, and even more importantly for the seasons beyond that. You do not want to jeopardize 2026, 2027, or even beyond just because you got impatient in July, and FL teams tend to be extremely careful in situations like this. The way the league's injury list rules work these days, if you activate a player and then realize he's not actually ready, you can't just stash him back on the physically unable to perform list or injured reserve without risking losing him for the entire season. Once you bring him off the PUP list at the start of camp, he's either on your active roster, or if you send him to IR, his season is done. That's why most teams prefer to slow play these situations. If there's even the slightest doubt, they'll let the player stay on the PUP or non-football injury list for a few extra weeks. Let him ramp up at his own pace and avoid taking any unnecessary chances. There's also the strategic element here. Keeping Rebel on the PUP list for the start of camp gives the Cowboys flexibility. They can evaluate how the rest of the roster looks during the first couple of weeks, see how the young defensive backs are performing, and reassess their depth before making any final roster decisions. And look, I've been saying this for a while now, but the cornerback room as a whole makes me nervous. Not just because of Rebel's situation, but because of the overall uncertainty with the group. Even if Rebel makes a full recovery and is ready by week 1 of the regular season, the reality is, we're still talking about throwing a rookie cornerback out there against some of the best wide receivers in the league right away. Think about it. The Cowboys open the season against teams with guys like A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. Are we really comfortable putting that kind of pressure on a rookie no matter how talented he is? And let's be honest, there's no guarantee that Trayvon Diggs will be back to full strength by then either. Coming off his own injury, the timeline for Diggs remains murky. Even if he's technically cleared, will he be the same shutdown corner right out of the gate? That's a big unknown. So then you're potentially looking at a scenario where Darren Bland, who's been fantastic, has to lock down one side while Rebel and maybe someone like Kelly Ringo or even Kelvin Joseph are battling it out for the other spot. And if one more injury happens, knock on wood, we're suddenly talking about guys like Israel Mukuamu and Drew Booth Jr. and Caleb Carson getting meaningful snaps. That's not exactly the deepest, most experienced group out there, which brings me to another point. I fully expect the Cowboys front office to keep a very close eye on how this cornerback group looks during the first couple of weeks of training camp. Don't be surprised if by late July or early August they're making phone calls and looking around the free agent market for a more experienced veteran cornerback option. The last thing you want is to go into the regular season relying entirely on rookies and unproven players in the secondary. Teams around the league know that's a recipe for disaster, especially in today's NFL, where passing offenses are more explosive than ever. And speaking of training camp, this is probably a good moment to pivot and touch on the upcoming preparations. While the main headlines are dominated by injury updates and roster speculation behind the scenes, the Cowboys coaching staff is laser-focused on implementing the new defensive system. This is the time of year where the playbooks start getting thicker, position battles heat up, and players fight to prove they belong on the final roster. But again, for Rebel, it's all about patience and smart recovery. The talent is there. The physical tools are obvious. Now it's just a matter of timing and making sure when he does take the field, he's 100% ready to go. Now shifting gears a bit, let's talk about something that sparked a lot of debate among Cowboys fans recently: the list of suggested offseason moves put out by Bleacher Report. They dropped an article outlining 3 moves the Cowboys should make before the start of training camp, and let me just say, some of their suggestions left me scratching my head. The first move they listed was to prepare to install the new defense. Seriously, that's your big idea? As if Dan Quinn left and the Cowboys just suddenly forgot how to run a defense. Look, Mike Zimmer is taking over as defensive coordinator. And of course, there's going to be a new system with new terminology and new wrinkles. But installing the defense isn't some optional project that the team needs reminding about. It's literally the most basic part of off-season preparation. It's like saying step 1, remember to show up for practice. Come on, that's just lazy analysis. The Cowboys have already been implementing Zimmer's concepts during OTA letters and minicamp. This isn't something that's starting from scratch at the end of July. Now the second move they suggested is one that actually makes sense, and that's extending Micah Parsons. This is the no-brainer of the offseason, the free square on the bingo card that somehow still hasn't been filled.